Fellow Ghanaians and fellow comrades around the world. Today, the 24th of February 2022 marks exactly 56 years since the illegal overthrow of the CPP and Kwame Nkrumah in 24th February 1966. And today, we have a discussion on this particular event, which has been themed Restoring Equality Before the Law in Ghana. Today, I'll be your host, and my name is Kojo Ahen Otu. And with me, we have the chairman of the Nkrumahist Circle. The Nkrumahist Circle is an Nkrumahist youth organization based in Kasua, which champions the cause for revolutionary education and the restoration of the Nkrumahist vision in Ghana. And he will be speaking on the theme, events leading to the illegal overthrow. And it will be followed up with the discussion on the illegal overthrow itself by a member of the Nkrumahist Caucus, Imole Oyeh. And lastly, on our table, we have Ama Boamah, who is the financial secretary of the Nkrumahist Circle, and she will be speaking on the aftermath of the illegal overthrow. So we are gathered here for this very important discussion, and we hope that a lot of misinformation and miseducation will be cleared. So, right to it, we want to commence with Comrade Amodani Gariba. And the main issue is, what were the events leading to the overthrow?
Good afternoon to everybody watching, listening to me. I'm very happy to be called upon to answer this very important question. However, to answer that question, I think in full, I think I would have to somehow write a book, right? However, for this very occasion, I would try to summarize all my thoughts so that we can have a fair understanding about what led to the event that led to the illegal overthrow of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Now, in answering that question, I will group the event into two categories: the internal event and the external event that led to the illegal overthrow of Dr. Kwame. Now, I'll start with the internal event. You see, prior to 1947, politics in Ghana was very reactionary, driven by reactionary lawyers. In 2 years after Kwame Nkrumah joining the the UGCC, he turned the landscape of politics in Ghana from one that is driven by reactionary lawyers living in the cities like Cape Coast, Accra, and Kumasi, to a politics that is driven by the people. I'm sure people have described that phase of Ghanaian politics as the veranda boys versus the reactionary lawyers. Veranda boys meaning Kwame Nkrumah with his people, popular people, the fishermen or whatever. So, following that, the reactionary lawyers thought that, after the British, it would be them. They are the ones going to rule Ghana for them. So they had these chieftaincies like the Wakwa states, the Asante Man, and other reactionary chieftaincies in Ghana supporting them. So I would like to tackle it from that standpoint. So you have, as far back as 1950, when Kwame Nkrumah and the colonial government were discussing the formula of getting representatives into the Legislative Council or Assembly, the Asante Man wanted a disproportionate number coming from them, right? And the formula cannot guarantee them. The formula will not give them that many people. That was one of the first points of conflict between CPP and the reactionary factions in Ghanaian, in the move for Ghanaian independence. And then you had the Ashanti political quagmire, right? I've talked about that. And then you have the 1954 cocoa crisis. In 1954, you had the price of cocoa soaring high because there was a lot of demand, right? So cocoa farmers thought that the government is going to increase the price at which they are going to, government is going to buy their cocoa. But the reality was, should the government pay them so much, it's going to cause inflation in the country. So Kwame Nkrumah had to, the government had to introduce a bill that is going to pay cocoa farmers a specific price for a tonnage of cocoa for 4 years, regardless of the price. So in that 4 years, if cocoa prices go as low as what the average is going to pay them that fixed price. Now the problem was farmers in Ashanti region, galvanized by the feudal element, I'm talking about Asante man, they used that as an opportunity to foment opposition against Kwame. Right? Generally, farmers in Western Central region, they agreed. But some of the farmers in Ashanti did not agree because the elitist, the feudal elitist elements in the region saw that as an opportunity to rally people against him. Right? And then you can talk about the Asanteman, the State Council Bill. I mean, in the heat of the moment when the cocoa crisis had fomented into some kind of political one through which people are galvanized against the CPP, it created what we call the NLM, right? And so the NLM had the tacit support of the Asante, right? So any chief that does not support the NLM was deemed as a traitor to Asante. So those chiefs were being distilled. Kwame Nkrumah thought it not right. So there was a need for a law to allow these two chiefs to be able to appeal. In Ghana here, when you start a case against somebody, you start at the lowest level, the magistrate court. You're not satisfied, you go to the high court. You're not satisfied, you go to the appeals court. You're not satisfied, you go to the Supreme Court. Even with the Supreme Court, when you're not satisfied, you can go for a review. They'll add more judges, more judges, more judges. So there's an avenue for appeal. Or the Asante man, the law then states that when the Asante sues you, there is no avenue for appeal. But Kwame Nkrumah created that avenue. Through that, we were able to reinstate the Joaboso Hine, the Bechem Hine, the Nimfa Hine, who were all distilled by the Asante for their support for the CPP. So doing that kind of fomented more opposition to the CPP and Kwame. Right? And then you had the case of the federation against the unitary system of government, where the NLM thought that, no, the NLM was a very tribalistic movement. They did not go beyond Ashanti region. They were not known in the colony. I'm talking about the southern belt of Ghana by then. They were not known in the northern territories. They were known in Transvolta, Togoland. So how could they express themselves in this region? It means that they are dead on arrival. But if they should pursue a federal system of government, they need to give them more autonomy in their own region, right? So they pushed for a federal system of government as opposed to a unitary one. The federal system was going to give several regions in Ghana autonomy, more autonomy over their economic, to some extent even political life. And that was, to me, I mean, I side with Kwame Nkrumah. If that was the way chosen, maybe we would not have Ghana today, right? But they pushed it out of their own selfish interest, not for the interest of everybody in Ghana. Then you had the Togoland question. Having failed to pursue the federal, having failed to achieve the federal issue, now they saw an opportunity to further balkanize Ghana by supporting opposition elements in Togo to call for a movement that is going to ensure that British Togoland is going to stand alone as a country as opposed to joining Ghana, right? But they lost that one too. So it appears that all the crucial battles that has to be fought in the course of Ghana's independence were being lost. We were losing it, right? So these are some of the internal battles, the internal events which call British colonialists to call for a re-election as the basis for granting Ghana independence. So their thinking was, in that election, Ghana CPP is going to lose, right? And as a result, either the independence is going to be delayed, or they might emerge, the leaders of Ghana leading into independence. But yet again, the CPP demonstrated that it was a huge a huge electioneering machine. You know, you just can't beat CPP at the polls. It was just impossible. Even after CPP was banned in 1966, 12 years later, I think 13 years later, when they decided to come together to contest another election, they still won. So CPP, as we had under Kwame Nkrumah, and I think a decade after the illegal overthrow, was still a formidable political force. So there was no way they could defeat CPP if they were going to cling onto their tribalism, religious sentiment, and what have you, because the Northern People's Party was based on tribalism of the Northern people, NLM, Ashanti tribalism, the Muslim Association Party based on religion. There is no way you could pose a threat CPP with such a vague, weak formation, right? So 1951 they lost, 54 they lost, 56 they lost, 1960 they lost, 1964 they lost. So the thing is, there is no way you can overthrow the CPP at the polls. Democratically, it won't happen. Now, let's look at the external factors. We have Kwame Nkrumah's Pan-African policy, right? At the day Ghana got independence, he made it known worldwide because everybody was listening to Ghana when Kwame Nkrumah was making the independence declaration. Everybody was listening, and he told the whole world that what we have toiled for more than 10 years to get is still meaningless if Africa is divided. So that should tell you the kind of conviction that was in the man. So moving from there, a year later, he organized Pan-African conferences, bringing independent African states together, bringing organizations that are fighting for independence in other African countries together. And, 1963, forming the Organization of African Unity as well. So what he was fighting for on the Pan-African stage was something that was going to give imperialism its death blow. If Africa united, there is no way imperialism would have sway over Africa. And the imperialists saw it. They saw it glaringly. And you can see manifestations of it in the Congo crisis, in Rhodesia and in Congo. South Africa, Rhodesia and Congo. When Congo under Lumumba was in trouble, Kwame Nkrumah, under the UN, contributed the largest contingent of soldiers to go and help the government restore law and order. South Africa, we saw the foreign policy stand that Kwame Nkrumah took. In Rhodesia, in fact, Kwame Nkrumah broke off diplomatic relations with British over Ian Smith's unilateral declaration of independence. You see, so the thing is, this man that we know of, we know as Kwame Nkrumah, will stop at nothing at Uniting Africa, which is going to give us our debt low. But the thing is, we can't overthrow him democratically. It's just not possible. So what can we do? It means that we have to use other means of getting him out. And that brought about the conception, the idea that we need to use extra legal means. We have to use the military, the gun, to force him out. And they had to use totally different people. So I'll come to that because there's confusion in Ghana nowadays over who really illegal overthrew Kwame Nkrumah. The conversation, the general understanding is that the MPP did. But that's not right. The MPP tried from 1951 all the way to 66, but they failed because they tried constitutional means, right? The NLC did, and if we are to trace the roots of the NLC, the NDC, we could see that they come from the NLC. So there is a need for us to have a whole new conversation about who really overthrew Kwame Nkrumah so that we shed more light on that fact and being able to do so is going to liberate Nkrumahist forces to be able to find their feet and real space in Ghana's political dispensation, because NDC is virtually occupying the space of the Nkrumahist because of this false narrative and thinking about what really happened. If we are able to expose them, show that they are the ones sitting on the space of Nkrumahism, then the Nkrumahist find their feet and their proper space. Right, so I'll end here if there are any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Comrade Amodani. What was the last push, if you can elaborate on that? Because you have this misinformation that his own military overthrew him. You see. So I want to get clarity on that. These individuals, at what point did they decide to turn against their own head of state and commit such treason?
One particular example was that Ali, who was the Commissioner of Police in Ghana, was under investigation by the Attorney General for engaging in diamond racketeering, that is, smuggling of diamonds that should be sold by the government of Ghana for revenues to Ghana or undertaking of development projects. Monies for this purpose rather were deposited into the pocket of Hali. He was under investigation, and Kwame Nkrumah was going back to Hanoi, come back and take a decision on that. Kwame Nkrumah has sacked his ministers because of corruption. Imagine what he would have done to IGP, right? Maybe worse. So, of course, if I were the IGP, I would not wait for Kwame Nkrumah to come back, right? And then aside that too, there were financial inducements by the CIA, $30 million. Recently, declassified information tells us that paid to carry out that start attack on Ghana.
Okay, so let me remind you that we are here also. We have an audience from the Nkrumahist student movement who are joining the discussion. And at this point, we'd like to give them the opportunity to ask the panel, particularly Comrade Amodani Gariba, some questions, if they have any.
My name is Mkaya, chairman of the Resident Task Force. My question is, some people call it the day of liberation. So I would like to find out the day of which people's liberation, which people were liberated on the 24th of February.
We know when the true liberation of Ghanaian people occurred. It occurred on 6th March 1957 and continued 1st July 1960. That's when Ghanaian people had got the freedom to decide on matters of their own welfare and well-being and cut off the ties with British colonialism. So when the NLM or the NLC says that it's a day of national liberation, I wonder, who are they liberating Ghanaians from? Kwame Nkrumah. It's just like when Kufuor says that Kwame Nkrumah killed Ghana's independence. So you wonder, was there any democracy
Leading to the overthrow, the illegal overthrow, there were two factors. So I'm saying that, but the internal factor, they are subject to the external. So is it that one of them is liberated or both of these two factors that are liberated?
it should be against an external force? But clearly, there wasn't such an external force to be dealt with, right? Certainly not by them. So, what liberation are they talking about? Still, after their liberation, we are having to deal with neo-colonialism. We are having to deal with authorial policies, economic policies. We are having to deal with a lot of problems that is not of our making, but the making of the capitalist class in Washington, in London, which is making our lives worse off, right? So there wasn't any liberation. It was actually imposition imposition of control of neo-colonialism that we now have to work towards liberation from. Right.
I see. So my question is, the illegal overthrow was marked by 8 persons, as you all know, 4 policemen and 4 soldiers. So, but then during the illegal overthrow, they were able to influence some of the soldiers to join the illegal overthrow. So I want to know how they were able to influence these soldiers to join them.
At least we didn't know that they were actually doing the bidding of the officers class and their paymasters from Washington. Right?
All right. The theme for today's discussion is about equality before the law, and that is restoring equality before the law in Ghana. So these events leading to the overthrow, how is it a breach on equality before the law?
This is a topic that one of the panelists is going to go deeper into it. But my surface idea is that before the counter-revolutionary rebellion, everybody was equal before the law because there was one constitution that was drafted by a constituent assembly that was voted for by the people, and that draft was voted as a constitution of the Republic of Ghana, guiding actions of everybody. Now, following the 1966 counter-revolutionary rebellion, there was no law. What the soldiers say was the law. So they decree their feelings, their thinking into law. How can there be equality before the law in the face of this huge subjectivity? How the general feels is what will influence the law. So, for example, if he has a fight with his wife and he has to go and make a decree, imagine the decree he's going to make. So, following the illegal overthrow, there was no law because the constitution was, suspended or abrogated and what have you. So, how the soldiers feel was the law, and that cannot be termed, democracy or a rule of law. So, to my understanding, this is how the equality of the law was taken with that sinful and shameful act that occurred on 66.
Okay, thank you very much, Comrade Amodani Gariba. I think we can do some applause for him. And on that note, we want to move to the next speaker, which is Comrade Imole Oyeh, and he will be talking about the illegal overthrow itself. So, Comrade.
Economic system, as well as the ruling class that is in power, remains the same. For example, when Rawlings and his PNDC took power from Illa Liman and the PNP, although there was a violent change of government, the same IMF, World Bank structural adjustment policies stayed in effect. The same privatization of our state resources remained in effect. The devaluation of the cedi remained in effect. And the bourgeois class of elites remained in power over the politics and policies of Ghana. And so, therefore, with the coup d'etat, although there's a change of government, this economic system and the ruling class remains the same. But with the counter-revolutionary rebellion, not only the government or those in political power change, but the economic system and the ruling class also changed. In case of counter-revolution, the ruling class changes from the masses, the working masses, the workers and the peasants and their political organization or party, which was the CPP, into a political administration which represents the bourgeois classes. The indigenous bourgeois in Ghana as well as the international bourgeoisie and the imperialists, like our comrade pointed out in London and Washington, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, the Kaiser, all ruling and exploiting Ghana's raw materials and owning them. And then furthermore, a change from the socialist economic system to the neo-colonial economic system. So instead of all of Ghanaians as workers, as the working masses, owning and controlling the resources of Ghana, now the bourgeois class is now in control over the resources of Ghana with their policy of privatization. Based on one man, one vote, universal adult suffrage, those who draft our Constitution were elected, and then our Constitution was voted in a national plebiscite. So the executive government, as well as the parliamentarians who were elected under such Constitution. But let's look at the type of change that took place. Instead of our votes deciding on who is going to be in the castle, governing us with executive power, now we have soldiers and police. Harley, Eku, Nunu, and Yakubu, which were police officers, and Ankara, Afrifa, Kotoka, and Okran as soldiers. And now they're the ones who have taken the seat of the office of the president and commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, away from our elected president. By which means did they take over that position? They took it by murder, murdering over 2,000 Ghanaians, waging violence, and like our comrade pointed out, lying that the castle was occupied by, our Flagstaff House was occupied by Russians in order to get soldiers to violently attack the presidential guard under false pretenses. And using that force of violence and murder and bloodshed, organized military violence, to take over the position of executive political authority in Ghana. What about the parliamentarians, which were the lawmakers that were elected by Ghanaians? Like Comrade Amodani pointed out, these parliamentarians were replaced by those 8 soldiers and police who had no political training, no political mandate. Not even one of them had an SHS certificate. And now they're the ones that took over the position of lawmakers in Ghana, legislating. Asante gold mine to Lone Row, a British gold mining corporation. I mean, all of our resources were sold, and the money was pocketed by those in political authority with no mandate from the citizens. No plan. The plan that we had in operation, the 7-year development plan, an independent Ghanaian plan for the Ghanaian society, was suspended, and the counter-revolutionaries brought the IMF and World Bank structural adjustment plan to dominate Ghana with their political discretion. And with that plan, our currency was devalued, our national resources were sold, our markets were open for foreign manufactured goods to be dumped on Ghana in a free-for-all. The labor unions were suppressed. Workers were not allowed to strike. And if they should strike, in general strike, they were subject to 25 years in prison or capital punishment to be executed just for exercising their right to organize as workers. And so when we talk about what happened in landing, the change that took place was the change from positive action being greater than negative action in Ghana into negative action being greater than positive action in Ghana. From socialists and Pan-Africanists, loyal Ghanaians who love the masses of the people, pursuing their interests, trying to unite Africa for the benefit of all of us, to brainwashed, blind, reactionary soldiers and police who were trained in London to put guns and point them at Ghanaians for the benefit and advantage of their colonial masters.
When it comes to the day being described as a counter-revolutionary rebellion, why is it that the narrative in the current context doesn't want to pinpoint this particular thing?
Okay, Kwame Nkrumah, when he described it as a counter-revolutionary rebellion, on page 44 of his book, Voice from Conakry, he also says the 24th February is not a liberation day, but a day of national crime. And so some of these forces have a vested interest in maintaining neo-colonialism in Ghana, especially those in the petty bourgeoisie. And so when we call it a counter-revolutionary rebellion, that means it's something illegal. That means it's something immoral and something that needs to be corrected. And so this national crime, the Constitution that was illegally overthrown, that act of suspending our Constitution with the NLC's proclamation decree, and then abrogating our Constitution, which is the 1960 Constitution, with NLC Decree 380, Constituent Assembly Amendment Decree. All this is covered up by an indemnity clause. And this indemnity clause prevents Ghanaians from being able to adjudicate events that took place with the counter-revolutionary rebellion. It prevents those events from being put in textbooks for political science students and history students or constitutional law students to read about in Ghana. And so therefore, it's, concealing the reality of what took place on 24th February 1966 from the legal and official mindset of Ghanaians. What is the basis for the indemnity clause in the 1992 Constitution? We know the 1992 Constitution was conceived, and those who wrote the Constitution were paid and selected by a military dictatorship under the chairmanship of Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, which was the PNDC, right? But this indemnity clause didn't just begin on 7th January 1993. This indemnity clause was converted from military legislation in a decree called Consequential and Transitional Provisions Decree. That decree is in 1969, and the Consequential and Transitional Provisions Decree is dated, 30th September 1969. And in that decree, the NLC dissolved itself to become the Presidential Commission in the 1969 Constitution. And in Article 4, Clause 1 of that decree, it says, all decrees of the National Liberation Council issued in pursuance of the said proclamation, insofar as they existed on the commencement of this decree, are hereby confirmed and shall form part of the laws of Ghana. That's constitutional. So this transition, military legislation of the National Liberation Council onto the 1969 Constitution. This decree has not been repealed and is still operational or enforced today, the abrogation of Pan-Africanism, and then safeguarding the indemnified class from adjudication before the laws of Ghana. And so the reason why there's not equality before the law is people who have murdered, people who have raped, people who have committed treason, people who have violated and illegally overthrown elected constitutions of Ghana, people who have usurped political and legislative authority of Ghanaian electorate are shielded and protected from any crime. They can't even be entertained in courts of law. But what about you and I, the Ghanaian citizen? We're subjected to the Constitution. We're subjected to the legislative process in Ghana. We're put before courts of law if we are, committers of crimes or perhaps accused of committing crimes. And so if we murder and we can be put before the law, and those who are indemnified murder and they can't be put before the law, where is the equality before the law? A class of entitled people, and it undermines the equality of distribution of resources. It undermines the equality of services that we may receive in healthcare institutions, in police institutions, in academic institutions. So when the principle of inequality before the law is established, then there's a chain a reaction or causal follow-through of inequality in various areas in the society. And so this we see in Ghana when we look at the type of services that are rendered to the citizen. We see that when it comes to our gold, our diamonds, our bauxite, and our manganese, just as there's inequality before the law with the privileged class that's above, the law, do we also have a privileged class when it comes to our oil and our gold and our diamonds, taking all the share of those resources, while the majority of the people, just like they are subjected, we are dispossessed from those resources. And when we look at the inequality, we can see the nepotism, the elitism, the patronage that exists in the country, because those who are in the indemnified class are closer to them, are in advantaged positions over the rest of us. So that's when we say orders from above, when you go to police station, that have rendered our wonderful and great nation to be hippie.
My name is Ejiri Nkrumah from the NC. I want to ask, currently Ghana is classified as one of the most peaceful countries in Africa. So I want to ask your opinion on that. Is Ghana classified as one of the most peaceful countries in Africa?
Well, myself in particular, I'm somebody in 2005, in March, my house was invaded by armed robbers, and I was shot in my leg, and I had to go into Kolebu hospital for 18 days to have surgery and have bullets removed from my leg. And so I've lived in other countries and I've never been shot. And so, you know, I may not be the right person to ask about the peacefulness, you know, in Ghana. I don't think a starving or hungry belly is peaceful. I don't think someone not having work to do is peaceful. And so, Sekou Touré said violence is forcing someone to do something against their will. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has to knock you in the head with a stick or shoot you with a gun for it to be violent. Neo-colonialism is violent. The violence that maintains, you know, us in a situation where we're dispossessed from our resources. That's violence. You know, we're one of the leading gold-producing countries in the world. But how many of us in this room have any gold, you know, ornament that they're able to wear proudly? That I'm a Ghanaian and we're a gold-producing country.
All right, so I'm quite privileged to sit between men to discuss on restoring equality before the law in Ghana. Right, I think my comrade has even gone more into my topic, but I'm going to go over them again. Right, so on 24th February 1966, there was a counter-revolutionary rebellion, and the perpetrators, after they had taken power, did a lot of things against the interest of the people. So one of the very first things that they did was to abrogate the 1960 Constitution. And bear in mind that this 1960 Constitution was the constitution that was mandated by the people. Nkrumah, as the leader of Ghana, as at that time, organized organized elections for the people to vote and elect members to form the Constituent Assembly. And the Constituent Assembly was formed to draft the 1960 Constitution. After the drafting of the 1960 Constitution, a plebiscite was held. The people voted in favor of the 1960 Constitution. Now the NLC took power, abrogated the 1960 Constitution, and then dictated laws that were supposed to be abided by the people. So the people was living under, the people of Ghana were living under military dictatorial legislation. And this military dictatorial legislation has followed through from government to government to government into this recent governance under the 1992 Constitution. So let's leave politics for men. Because if you should read or if you should listen to people who were present during the time of the illegal overthrow, like our comrade Abena Enin, who was then a minister in Kwame Nkrumah's government. Even though she was pregnant, during the illegal overthrow, she was jailed. So what signal is it sending to African women? What signal is it sending to Ghanaian women? It is signaling to us that if as a woman you should try to join in the struggle, to join in the politics of the country, to make your contribution, then you are susceptible towards brutality. Moving on, we can also talk about inequality in Ghana, like my comrade had already stated. But even going back to the violence was not only meted on women, but I would say the people of Ghana in general. But since I'm a woman, I kind of laid emphasis on the violation of women. But linking it to today's current neo-colonial system, the brutality is still ongoing. The African youth rise and then demonstrate against the government, and what do we see? We see police brutality. We see the army shooting directly at unarmed protesters. Is this the kind of democracy we are living in? If there is no equality before the law, then indeed I would say Ghana is never a democratic state. Ghana was a democratic state under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah and the CPP government, but not under this neo-colonial government of today. Today, the government is occupied by these indigenous bourgeoisie who I would say, and frankly speaking, is a fact that they had gained their power from the illegal overthrow that happened on 24th February 1966. That class in particular would never have had the chance to come to power if not through the counter-revolutionary rebellion. Because the African people, especially the Ghanaian masses, had voted for a one-party socialist state because they were never see themselves above the law. That is why they can engage in corruption. They can engage in bribery. They embezzle the funds of the state, and they are not put before the law court. They are caught red-handed, and they are not put before the law court. Why? Because they see themselves above the law. But the Ghanaian masses will take, or let me use this word, will steal a goat, will steal cassava, will steal maize, but that masses will be sent to court and jail. Is this the equality before the law that we talk about?
All right. Thank you, Comrade Ama, for that wonderful presentation.
My name is Nasara Kampo. I am the Education and Culture Chair, and I have two questions for you. And one of them is, do you think what took place on 24th February 1966 is due to white supremacy? And the second question is, after the illegal overthrow of Osajefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, why was there a need to devalue the Ghana currency?
If the 24th February illegal overthrow was as a result of white supremacy. Okay, so, well, yes, had actually had their military training in Britain, right? And through their training, they were indoctrinated. They were taught that the white man or the British is their master, right? Even though later on they came to be on the side of American imperialism, initially their training inculcated in them that white supremacist thinking. So they saw themselves as inferior to their masters. That is why when they came back to Ghana to work as military and police personnel, they had to do the bid of their masters. And you could see that the American Central Intelligence Agency was also in there. So looking at that, the superiority of the white imperialist over the black.
Look at the audience.
Had to do the bidding of the imperialist. The currency. Devaluation of the currency. Right? You see, if a country's currency would have more value, from what I know, during Nkrumah's government, and the economy was also a socialist economy. But then after the illegal overthrow, the system changed from a socialist economy to a neo-colonial economy. The people lost control over the resources. Now, the NLC were given aid and loans from IMF and World Bank. And we know that these institutions would never want competition. So what do? Like, because we don't have control over our resources, we cannot back our currency. And so it devalues our currency. And then all the time you see that there will be inflation. And then at the end is the people that suffers because there will be increase of taxes on the working masses. So lack of control over the resources it also plays a role in the devaluing of the Ghanaian currency, and it couldn't compete with the dollar.
How can you motivate the women to engage in political affairs or engage in the struggle to bring change from neocolonialism today to socialism?
I need you. I can only do that with you. I can do that with all the fellow women comrades here. We have to start it. We have to start it. We need no one. Because frankly speaking, I can't do it alone. I wouldn't even know where to start. But with you and Serum and Zuta, Menen, Afia, with you, with me, all of you with me, then we can move forward. We can educate our fellow Ghanaian women, no matter where they are, be it the market, in the churches, wherever we find them, we can send the education to them, and the revolution will be successful. We will have them to join the struggle.
On the last question, the whole discussion to close, and today, let me remind you again that the discussion on 24th February 1966 counter-revolutionary rebellion. A lot of information has been cleared, a lot of discussions and misconceptions have also been cleared. And one particular thing is for us to understand that what happened on 24th February 1966 is not a coup, but a counter-revolutionary rebellion that ushered in or brought to power individuals who don't represent the Ghanaian masses. Like the first speaker, Comrade Amodani Gariba, pointed out, these corrupt, selfish, treacherous, and individuals who betrayed the nation were liberated. And they fought against the people's government because of their own corruption, because of their class mentality. It has also been cleared that those who fought against the independence were part of the individuals that were actually pushed and sponsored upon the actions of the 1966 counter-revolutionary rebellion. Earlier in the discussion, we had points on how this counter-revolution is different from a coup d'etat coming from Comrade Imole when he pointed out that it has to do with class issues. And then we also had a discussion that pointed out how there was violence in this transition, how the indemnity is not democratic, and again how this overthrows has also ushered in the fear and violence in our Ghanaian politics. And in general, how the 1992 constitution is not a democratic constitution in light of its transitional process and the indemnity clauses, the enormous powers to give the president, and other things that does not make this nation develop as a state. And lastly, we have pointed out how the 1966 counter-revolutionary rebellion rather went against also the Pan-African part and vision that Nkrumah had laid down for ourselves and our fellow Africans across the globe. And so as we end this discussion, we have to urge every Ghanaian out there, especially the youth, how the social studies textbooks and government textbooks in this current nation miseducate them. They should go out there and search for the right information. We recommend that they read books written by Kwame Nkrumah on the day and the activities that happen on that particular day. We recommend that place in Ghana for every Ghanaian youth out there to grab a copy and read. As we bring the session to a close,